we're going to jump right in. This is just a Loom video that I'm going to be uploading to YouTube. I want it to be really, really valuable. I know my lighting is not great. I have a document in front of me, so if you see me moving around, I have bullet points to stay on task with so that I can make sure that you get as much information as possible. So what I'm going to do is essentially reflect on exactly what it took to hit 7 figures for the first time, how I did that in 7 months, so that you can create it. Like, I'm going to tell you the top pillars. So last year, my business, we essentially lost the entire front end. We were at $0 for 3 months in a row. The marketing strategies that we had worked to that point when we tried to reinstate them were not working. At the time, that was doing boosted post strategy with valuable content, and started doing that, and it was going to outrageous audiences. Like, even targeting to the US, we were getting people in India and places like that. And so that was no longer an option. And it was just burning cash, which is really easily to do when you're running ads. So what did we do? Again, for context, we were at $0 for 3 months in a row. And it was a validated offer that we had sold before. So this is not like brand new offer that has never been tested. And relaunching during that phase was super painful. Like, I was leveraging all of the debt. It was running the plane into the ground as we're like trying to build the runway to be able to get it back up. Because as you know, if you're in business, you just keep doing the work and there is no giving up. There's no plan B. You just keep trying to look for doors that you can go through and create different ways. So these are all the steps that we took. So number one, the biggest, most important piece, it's a boring basic, but you have to have a tracking sheet of every marketing funnel that you have, every marketing lever, so that you know what your inputs are. Like, you have to know the inputs that you are doing and what the outputs are, so that you can stack them against each other and say, oh, this one is performing the best. And so then you lean into that one. If you do start a new lever or test, this is like the next thing, have a testing budget and have parameters that dictate, is this good or bad? And also have a test window. So give yourself time to work towards those parameters. A lot of people will not give themselves parameters. They won't give themselves anything as far as data is concerned with like what to expect. And then they make an emotional decision, and then that's why you see people jumping around. So give yourself the test budget and parameters and the window to say, I'm going to test this thing for this long at this budget. And so for us, I had to find a completely new lever. So at that time, 100% of the budget went into testing, which was very risky. 100% of the money, and well, it wasn't actually cash flow at the time. It was all debt, all leveraged debt. All of that went into the testing budget, which was very, very risky. But in those situations, I kind of put my back against the wall and I just trusted myself to figure it out. So next up is paid traffic grows you faster. So this was the mechanism of growing really, really quickly from zero. And so in the process of that 7-month window, getting paid ads going, we went from 0 to we went to a 72K month to I think it was 202 and then about 375-ish each month to month. There was a month break between the 200 and the 370 something because we were traveling as well. So paid traffic grows you faster if you have the data. So remember, the very first thing that I said is you need to have a baseline tracking sheet. But if you have the data, you know which levers you can pull harder and which ones you need to adjust or kill. And you also know exactly, and this is where I'm meticulous with my tracking sheets, you know exactly where the constraint is in each of those funnels or levers or processes. So for instance, for an event funnel, we know how much I'm spending on ads. Okay, how many people are clicking on the ad? That tells me something about like the headline, maybe the image. From there, it's, all right, well, how many people converted on the landing page? If they're not converting on the landing page, but the ad is kind of doing well, it's like the landing page and the ad aren't congruent with each other, and we know that's where the constraint is. And then the next step from there is if people are registering but then they're not showing up, that's more of an issue in your nurturing sequence isn't that great, or you started marketing it way too early. We found that about 2 weeks out is the most that you want to market something, but the biggest bang for your buck, like you're going to get the biggest influx within 10 days of the event, and really that final week of push is where you're going to get a lot of the biggest traffic. And so nurturing sequences, while those aren't necessarily the things to spend all of your time on, you should spend most of your time on the headline and the ad creative, because that's what attracts people in the first place and makes them resonate with what this is to begin with. Like whatever it is that you're doing, the event funnel was just what we did. That's the more important thing to spend your time on than like the nurturing emails, even though those are a piece of it to try to make sure that people are getting there. So then from there, it's all right, of the people that showed up, what's the retention rate? And these are all things that you track so that you can see where people are falling off. Like data is the most important thing when it comes to scaling, because if you're not looking at every segment and seeing where people are falling off and where they're not making a decision, then you're making emotional decisions. So from there, if people are staying the whole time, but then they're not booking calls, then you have a problem with either the pitch, and like usually that's the thing that we tested so many times over and over again, is people just aren't booking because you're not giving them a reason to. So maybe you gave so much value, but then they felt like they could do it themselves, or they don't think that their problem is big enough that they need you. There's a lot of reasons that people might not book, or you didn't make it urgent enough. So those are the biggest things that we found. Next step moving forward, and this is where I'm like kind of riffing, and I'm like, there's so many ways that I could take this and go. I love the data. Like, if I can emphasize anything, make a baller spreadsheet so that you can look at your business and know exactly what's going on at a bird's eye view, especially if you have one thing that's already working. Like, this is how you can go from something working at like a $70,000 a month and scale to hitting 7 figures for the first time. And then before you know it, you're hitting multiple 100K months. And it's the wildest thing. And you can literally make that change, like shift your business and the success of your business within a month. So doing that is really, really important. Going back to paid traffic, something that I said a little bit ago. I said we were going to go on tangents. This is my ADHD brain. If you have the data, again, you know which levers that you can pull harder and which ones to adjust or kill. For our business, the reason that we went into an event funnel was because the boosted posts, like I said, weren't performing. We were getting like really weird traffic. And then a VSL funnel, it just wasn't hitting. And calls were kind of expensive, and then like those weren't closing. And so I leaned into an event funnel because in the education space, this was in the rehab industry, I came up with the idea of Clinical Mastery Week. And so trust is not easily bought into in an industry of doctors where like not knowing is taboo. So a multi-day event geared at the concept of Con Ed, which is widely approved of in that space, seemed like a good idea because if somebody spends a lot of time with you, it builds trust. And so I was like, I think this could be really good. Branding it as Clinical Mastery Week, I was like, this sounds great. And so I put it all together. And then the caveat on paid traffic, if I haven't already touched on this enough, is that the hook and the headline are the things that the audience wants. And that is called market intent. And it's going to be the strongest indicator if your marketing lever even performs well. So if your creatives and your headline aren't bringing in anything, it's because your messaging is not there, and the market intent, like the market doesn't want what you're saying. So you need to change what you're saying and how you're positioning it. So if your creatives and your headlines are trash, nobody's going to make it to your landing page. And the downstream effect is that nobody shows up. And one thing, I actually spoke to one of the C-suite levels at ACQ about this, and his take after the $100 million money models launch was that the headline and the creatives are the most important to spend your time on. And if you have to choose, like spend way more time on that than you actually spend on what you're teaching inside. Because I was telling him that, you know, I spent so long putting together the email sequences and the push to book sequences for after the event was over, and that I spent so long on the lectures and like writing everything out. And he said, well, like, how important do you think that was? And I was like, well, I mean, looking at the data, I mean, a small percentage of people booked after the event was over. Like 95%, I would say, booked during the event. And he's like, yeah, if you're going to do something, it needs to be the headline and the creatives. Like, that is where you spend the most of your time. And that makes sense because it's congruent with content, where if you spend 90% of your time on the first 3 seconds or on the first thing that somebody sees, that's what makes or breaks if they even see the rest or not. So if your headline and your creative are so hammered in, and like that's what people want, that's what the market intent is, now they have the opportunity to experience everything else that you have. So I think that's a really great pearl of wisdom. And it was one of the biggest reasons that initiative was successful and able to scale. So then with the next thing is keeping your avatar in mind. Like, what touch points do they need to stay on track? So again, going back to data, where do you see them fall off typically in your sales cycle? And then you work backwards with that data. So for instance, if people are, like I was talking about earlier, if people aren't showing up, it's what can I add in? And our team tested a WhatsApp chat leading into the event for engagement and for just dropping more resources that attendees could then deep dive on. So like podcast episodes, sending them lead magnets, just engaging and talking to them, like, where are you from? Anything that you can do to nurture them. Because then as the event is running, they're building this deep trust and relationship with you. And in the events that was also there, it had great conversions, and the return on ad spend for this whole funnel was 6 to 12x every time we ran it, which was massively successful. That's not like what typically happens in a webinar or an event funnel or like whatever challenge sequence. And so this was a massively profitable event. And so all of this comes down to, like, if we summarize what I have said so far, number one, it's track your data granularly. Like, get it down to where you can see every step of the way. And then number two is focus on one thing. Number three is once you have that one thing performing consistently and successfully, you do more of it. So how much more can you do? Is it making the one event bigger by spending more? Is it doing it more frequently? You want to test it and just do more until the wheels fall off. You want to do more, not different. Because this whole time we've been focusing on improving and continuing to iterate the one thing that we know works. Why would we do something differently if we can continue squeezing more juice out of this lemon? So you want to test it till the wheels fall off. And for us, the constraint was the sales team size. So more frequent worked over a higher budget. And at the time, we were spending $40,000 per run on ads and doing it once every 3 to 4 weeks. For you, that might be different. And so the thing about scaling and making more money in business always comes down to what the biggest constraint that, if fixed, can do the most. Like, what is the one constraint? And like, so many founders jump around 10 different strategies and are inconsistent with every single one of them because you're in a fire, but there's little fires everywhere. And the key is that you have to be able to tolerate the little fires burning you so that you can put out the one big fire. And it's uncomfortable, but you have to just tunnel vision in. And so when you focus on the one thing and you do more of the one thing and you do data-driven decisions, like, that's all it is. Business is very logical. It's just that we've conditioned ourselves into making emotional decisions because we're so uncomfortable with the discomfort of letting all of these other things happen. And we're like, oh, well, there's an upset person over here and this little thing needs to be done and all of these different inefficiencies. Great. Like, if you have people that you can put on that, good. but you have one priority to focus on. And so something that I do personally is I decide the night before what my one pillar is for the next day, maybe top two. I put a little sticky note on my desk and I railroad myself into only doing that number one thing. And until that one task is done, I do not allow myself to say yes to anything else. And that's how I move forward. Even though a lot of things never get done, like that is business. And the trying to jump around and get it all done, especially as a solopreneur, like trying to get a lot of it done, or even like leading a team, I think trying to do and be everything is what gets in people's way. And so you look at the really successful people who have grown a really big business, it's focusing on one thing. It's singularity of focus. So it's not easy. It is simple. The hardest part of climbing the mountain is staying on task and letting those little fires burn. But I would say those are the biggest reflections, or I guess the story of and little pearls from scaling to seven figures and what that season was like. I plan on doing many more reflections on that and pulling more, I think, more principles from that. So I'll be making more videos. I plan to do a series on it. I'm going to do multiple different series here on the podcast. And if you have any requests or any thoughts, I'm happy to take those into consideration for future videos. I'll see you next time.